start the recording also. So, and if you've seen the other earlier sessions, you know the format. You'll have to introduce yourself. So thank you, Chuck, for being part of this. I'm really this whole Hawaii and the kind of course, the traditional methods and everything, whatever you bring out will be really nice. So thank you for being part of it. It's a pleasure listening to you, and it's going to be a pleasure listening to you again. I know that. So please introduce yourself and take it forward. I'll come in when you ask me to come in. I won't come in before that.
Fair enough. And hopefully this will be a conversation, a dialogue, an exchange. And it's most appropriate to start with thanking you for making these connections, these stories, these exchanges, these insights available to all of us to participate in directly, to participate in by watching, by listening, and to take those out like the ripples in the pool and share them with the people in our lives. So the gifts that you are making possible and sharing with us that we can then share with others are extremely precious, and those will continue to grow with time and with exposure. Thank you for making these possible. And to thank the people who have been taking the time to do this. You have had maybe 90 people already, and not only people who are extremely well known internationally, Ken Cloke and others, but people who are becoming known in their communities, in their regions, in their nations, and later internationally. And the contributions are all extremely valuable, because I think one of the things that you're bringing home to us is that the heart of what we do is to connect our collective humanity with each other and with the people that we serve. And you are exemplifying that by the things that you do to make that possible. We know that one of the ways that makes that possible is through sharing stories. Stories are kind of the verbal music of what we do. And we're kind of like jazz musicians who may perform in small groups or larger groups. And there are solos, and there are duos, and there are combinations. And everyone gets to shine in their own way at their own time. And each one appreciates that. And we use the improvisation, and we use all of the things that we can in connecting with each other to bring harmony from discord, just as the musicians do in jazz and in other forms of music. So that's kind of a good place to start. How does that register with your experience and what you do in your work, in your life, Vikram?
But no, first, Chuck, you haven't introduced yourself. You know that? You've missed out the most important part.
Okay. There are so many ways to do that, and some of the stories could be long, but I'm not going to impose that on people.
We need the long. We need the long. So we need the long.
But to keep it focused, I was actually born in northern Louisiana. My parents were from a very, very small northern Louisiana town. It was so small that there was no OBGYN doctor available, and we had to go 30 miles to another city for my delivery. This was in 1946, a completely different time, different era in so many, many ways. The first year of the baby boomers. And my mother was an extremely strong, progressive, independent, although humble, kind, welcoming, compassionate Southern woman, was resolute on one thing. She was not going to raise her children, and I was the first, in that part of the country at that time. My father was fine with that. He was a heart research doctor, and he wound up placing with the University of Wisconsin hospitals in Madison, Wisconsin, And that was my first contact with people from South Asia. There were many people in the university and the medical school who were from different regions of India, from Pakistan, and I actually worked for a number of them in their research work. And what a wonderful opportunity. I was in a small, mostly white Midwestern town, but because of the university and my father's work, I got exposed early on to a wonderful diversity of cultures and people. And I think in that way, I've carried forward my mother's tradition. She left small town in northern Louisiana because of the limitations and the lack of the diversity, the richness culturally that was more available in other parts of the country. I've left Madison, Wisconsin, which is a wonderful town, university town, for Hawaii, because it's a much more diverse, culturally rich environment. I had the good fortune when I finished college to join a group called International Voluntary Services and to get assigned to work. It was kind of an international Peace Corps type group, get assigned to work in Vietnam during the war, 1968 to 1971, in the central coast of Vietnam, and then later in the Delta, Mekong Delta of Vietnam. I became very close to my students and friends there. I wound up getting married to one of my fellow teachers. She was a French teacher from central Vietnam, from Hue, and we were actually married in Hue in 1971. It was a very politically intense time. 1 or 2 days before our wedding, there were major political demonstrations in which students, Vietnamese students and wounded war veterans and people who were demonstrating against the Saigon government, against the American intervention in Vietnam. And the family was concerned that maybe they should put off the wedding. We had the wedding. We did a traditional Vietnamese wedding in the clothing, in the ceremonies, in the rituals. And it was done in the old citadel where my wife's family lived. And the people in the community, especially the older people, came and they brought the younger people and they gathered around the little one-room house that my wife's family lived in. And they stood at the doors and the windows and all around, and they watched, and the older people explained to the younger people the meaning of all the ceremonies and all the rituals and all of the parts of the wedding proceedings. So it was an opportunity for us to both give back to the community for the richness that it shared with me and with us, and to receive their blessing, their support, their understanding, their welcoming. And I think that process brought home to me what led us to choose to live and raise our family. And my kids are Vietnamese American, my grandkids are Vietnamese American. My granddaughter here is Hawaiian, Filipina, Vietnamese, Anglo, Scotch, Irish, Latino, Native American, a whole bunch of other stuff. And it's wonderful because my daughter has taught me many, many lessons. And one of the lessons she taught me as she was growing up, she loved the book To Kill a Mockingbird. And so as she grew up, I asked her why that was her favorite book. And she said, many people love that book because in the end, justice wins out over racism, prejudice, and bias, and fairness. Okay, but you're telling me that because you seem to have a different focus. What's the central theme for you? And she said, to me, the most important part of the book, the one that we need to learn the most from, is the lifelong friendship of Boo and Scout, the young white child, the lawyer's son, and the young black child of the lawyer's client who's accused of murder and rape. And they are connected close as if they were brother and family. Not because of the things that are the same about them, but because of the things that are different and their love for each other and the differences in each other and how much more they are because of combining those differences in their love and loyalty for each other. So I think those stories kind of destined me, as I'm sure your life stories have conditioned you, for going into this work where if we can offer people the chance for us to be a resource to help them connect their collective humanity in ways that can bring both of them more benefits than conflict, that they can get through the conflict as intact as possible in their humanity, in what makes them special and different and unique as people, then we're serving, I think, what we're really here to do. And I got that from my mother, who is the most welcoming, gracious, unjudging person I've ever known in my life. And she lived till age 95. She got her money's worth, as they say. And that's kind of the essence and the core of the background of my story. Who I am, how I got here, but where I've been and where I'm going.
But Chuck, did your mother move with, did she come to Hawaii, or she spent time here, or she was there?
She stayed in her home in Madison, Wisconsin. My sister and her family were there. My brother and his family were in Michigan for a while, and then they moved to Arkansas and then Florida. But by the time she was aging, it was just most comfortable for her to stay where we could come to see her instead of her traveling to see us. That said, she came to Hawaii every year for a month or more. She stayed with us, and she and my children were extremely close. My daughter was her first and only granddaughter and her first grandchild. So there was a special closeness there. And I think having the time with her in Hawaii has stayed part of the heart of the connection that continues to bring my daughter and her family from Boston back to Hawaii every year to visit. My son and his family still live here. And my first wife, who is still one of my best friends in the world, lives here, and my son's family lives with her. So even though we did not stay together as a married couple, we've chosen to stay together as partners in our family, in our friendship, in our loyalty, love, and support for each other. And the kids see that. And the kind of model that they have, I think, is the kind of model that people like Michael Lang and Susan Guthrie and those who do the really difficult family divisions and family divorces and custody disputes, that they manage to somehow bring that goodness to people. And that connects to the core process of conflict resolution, which the indigenous people of Hawaii have developed and continue to share for hundreds of years. And it's called Ho'oponopono. And Ho'o means to put or to put into place or to put into balance. Pono means that which is right, that which is proper, that which is aligned the way that it most should be, spiritually and morally. And Ho'oponopono does that. Oversimplified, it uses 4 steps. The first step is apology. the repentance for having caused harm or upset or disruption or distress to another or to others. The next step is forgiveness, both to seek it and to earn it. The third step is usually considered to be gratitude, thankfulness for the ability to be able to restore that human connection through sincere repentance and apology and sincere forgiveness and restoration. And the fourth step is the love that can come out of restoring that human connection. So those are the elements of Ho'oponopono. I was actually taught by Hawaiian and Asian American masters of it. There are now a number of people here who teach the techniques of Ho'oponopono. And it's interesting because we can look at some of the leading people in conflict resolution: Nina Meyerding, Peter Robinson, Joe Barry in Ireland. And they exemplify the exact teachings and the values of Ho'oponopono. They use apology, forgiveness, gratitude, and love to restore and reconnect not only people and relationships, but the humanity of those who engage in that restoration, in that reconnection. We can't always restore the relationship. Sometimes in mediation, we're actually there to terminate a business relationship or a legal relationship. But the ways in which we do that need to honor the core values of the people whose conflict brought them to the point where we can be a resource to help them achieve that restoration of humanity, that restoration of valuing human qualities and relationships. We don't seek to make them friends again, or sometimes even family again, but at least we offer to help them conduct themselves and conclude their relationship in a way that offers honor and dignity to the other and offers honor and dignity to themselves. And through that shared honor and dignity, they can part without rancor, without the need to be vindictive or harmful to each other. Because underneath, we share with the medical profession, whatever we do, above all, do no harm. Do good if we can, in the ways that the people that we connect with make possible, but always be alert, be sensitive, be aware of pathways to harm and where the sensitivities in the people that we work with are, and to honor those and respect those so that they won't bring more harm where there's already been more than enough.
But Chuck, how are we going to take Ho'oponopono to the world?
You know, it's a great question because I was a 60s guy. And in the 60s and 70s, many of us had gathered and we resisted the patterns, the controls, the authorities. And we did that in struggles for peace and for civil rights. If we had known, particularly in the US back then, that this country would regress so far in those key human elements of peace and civil rights, I think it would have been really saddening and disheartening to us. But we only have two choices. Ibram Kendi is right. You can only be racist or anti-racist. There is no middle ground. You can only be human and humane or inhuman and inhumane. Ultimately, whether it's the yin-yang philosophy or that of Theravada or Mahayana Buddhism or Christianity or Hinduism or the Sikh faith, no matter what the faith may be, there is a duality of choice. And it's not good and evil. It really is, I believe, humanity and inhumanity. Those are the only two directions. What we do, what we say, who we are, who we choose to be, can go.
Yeah. Because I feel the way things are, these whole traditional things, methods of dispute resolution or thinking or spirituality, whatever, I mean, everything is interlinked. I'm not, you can't really say that one can be taken away from the other. They all work together. So to take them as a package, I think that is what we need to do, and people like you have to do it with your vast experience, your cross-cultural experience, and your thought. I mean, everyone doesn't have these thoughts, Chuck. Maybe you take it for granted, but everyone doesn't have these thoughts. So you have to be out there.
That's a really, really valuable and important insight. And it brings to mind that, let's say, for example, that the two of us were in a room with several of the people who may be watching, listening, thinking, and feeling things in response to our conversation. My first thought would be, here is a man with thousands of years of culture. I have 200. Here is a man who has learned and grown up in a society in which the collective responsibility to the unit, to the family, to the extended family, to the community, to the region, to the nation, and beyond, to humanity in general, is ingrained in the fiber and core of his very being. Let us gather around and pass the talking stick to this wonderful man, and let us listen to him and let him share with us the gifts of all that experience has taught him that can help us reconnect in ways that are better than the conflict that has brought us here.
Wow. Wow. That's like, I'm speechless. So I don't want to go any further. I think we can just, I really can't. So I mean, it's a responsibility, yes, but I think people like you who come together and take it, I mean, just the fact that you understood the whole concept behind the symposium, that is one, it's a mix. People who might not have those voices to bring them out, and the people who are out there and everyone knows about and loves listening to, that mix I think is important, because a lot of good voices are never able to come out, because good people, I've always said, do not make too much noise, and it's actually the other ones, all the hate and the negativity all around us is what you listen to and hear. So I've been telling everyone, do not listen to it, stay away from it. There is so much positivity around us, the people there, we just have to link them together, which is what I'm doing, Chuck. That's exactly what I'm doing.
And you do it so very well. If I simply look at your countenance, your body language, I listen to your tone of voice, it's calming. It welcomes the positive spirit in me. And it reminds all of us that belief in ourselves, in each other, in the possibilities that our collective connection can make available to us, that's where our best path lies. And I know for me, it's interesting. I began to learn a little about Buddhism in college when I went to live in Vietnam for 5 years in the 60s and 70s. I learned, especially from my brother-in-law, who was wonderfully knowledgeable and gifted at it, that we either could sink into the samsara, all of those things that drag us down, that diminish us, kind of the quicksand of the things that dehumanize us, or we can focus on the oneness between and among all of us. That may make it possible to gradually inch along a path toward enlightenment. And sometimes it seems like we're Sisyphus rolling that rock up the hill. Every time we get half the way closer, it rolls all the way back down and we got to do it again. But it teaches us that two of the most important virtues of human love and connection are patience and perseverance. That the core of our positivity is in the fact that we are loyal to those values in ourselves and in each other, and to the ability to connect them. And if we meet people with whom they cannot connect, sometimes we move on. Sometimes we have to deal with those people. Sometimes we're defensive. We have to just try and minimize the harm to ourselves and others. We just went through 4 years, no matter what your politics are. You can look at what happened to the attitudes, the tone and spirit, and the relationships of the people in this country. And things happened that we have not seen in my 75 years, and that we hoped we had grown beyond and would never see again. And if anything, it's reminded us we have to be stronger, more resolute, more dedicated, more patient, more perseverant to honor and cultivate our human connection collectively with each other than ever, because they are now threatened more than ever.
But I mean, a lot of people might think that this symposium is about mediation in our culture and traditions, won't realize that exactly what all you're saying is part of the entire mediation process. All these things that you have spoken about, I mean, like I keep saying about spirituality, one part, and good thoughts and everything, all those things make a mediator and take the process through. So I think that is because everyone, a lot of times I've seen the symposium starts with the law in our country is this. It always goes there, which, okay, maybe that people want to talk about. Yes, for me, that is a totally different world, a world that has been created. Maybe people don't understand that where it has to be. So I think that is why we have to take these discussions, that there is a lot which people and society have to become like, and the whole concept of mediation by itself is part and parcel of that. So I think that is what we need to bring out.
That's so important for all of us to understand, because we're now at a stage where, especially those of us who are in conflict prevention, management, and resolution, we can no longer afford to be single silo, specialized problem solvers. We can't wait for people to bring us conflict and to try to sell them solution paths. We have to go out and proactively get together interdisciplinary, intersectionally, across all differences, across all borders and boundaries, in ways that can connect and can cross those barriers and those divisions. We can't afford those anymore. They literally threaten our life. So just as climate change forces us to deal with the environment systemically, the pandemics in all areas, not just virus and health, in education, in homelessness and affordable housing, in governance, in mental and physical health, in all areas of life. We are beset with the pandemics of inequality, of treatment, of attitude, and we have to recognize the connection between the individual manifestations and the underlying systemic causes and problems. Ibram Kendi is right. Individuals may carry out bias, prejudice, and harm, but it's the policies that those practices enable and support that make them systemic in their harm and in their impact.
But I think, Chuck, what we've done is, I think maybe we have to go back, and the way society has been structured, the way we've moved forward, all those connections of, it starts with family. It doesn't, I mean, but to even say that family is not part of it, starts from family, then moves into the community, and of course the world, you finally get there. So I think we have to go backwards, and I think maybe question the way that we have created the society around us. Dispute resolution will come when you've restructured a lot of things will be taken care of right there. So how do we do that with you? I mean, you've had so much experience and everything. How do we restructure society?
You just hit on exactly the one thing that has always worked in the societies that have become collective and have stayed collective. And that is the value, the dedication to, the support of, and the loyalty to the unit always exceeds and supersedes the individual. We have not honored that in this country, and we are paying for it. It has enabled people to politicize public health and safety in ways that we've never seen. When I was a kid and we had the polio vaccine or the measles vaccine, and even before that, years earlier, the smallpox vaccine, that never happened. Those were never politicized. It was never a question of, I'm an individual, I have a right to refuse that. I have a right to control what's done to my body, what's put in my body. Not when your body affects that of other people. And because the unit, the family, the extended family, the community is the unit where our affections, our loyalties, and our dependence and interdependence really lie. That's where we have to commit to put them first again. And if you look at the societies that do that, particularly in Asia, in South Asia, in Southeast Asia, even without resources for the great majority of the population, they have still managed to master and control these pandemics and their effects because they put the unit first, the family, the extended family, the community, and the whole ahead of the individual.
Because I tell you, Chuck, what has happened is that there is this word that we use, individualistic societies. That's an incorrect usage. These are selfish societies. There are selfish people. This whole concept that we are creating an individualistic, these are collective, these are individualistic. I think we might need to change that usage of word. I think we need to use selfish. It might not be liked by people. And it's not that it's not US. I'm not even saying US. It's happening everywhere. India will go through the same situation. That same change will happen. What you are saying, that we as a society, the whole collective aspect. Yes, because 60% of our population is still rural. So at least we held on to a lot of it, but it's not that it's not changing. So for us, we have to do it very fast so that we don't lose out on a lot of things. So I think that part, I think, is very important, what you're saying.
And yet we have an anomaly in this country where the rural minority and its political representation have, over the last 40 plus years, developed a system to be able to impose their will on the majority, even at the risk of public health and safety, even at the risk of education that will enable us to understand our common humanity and to honor it, even at the risk of housing and homes for those who are the most vulnerable and the most marginalized.
Yeah. But now you have to take us into mediation, and you have to take us through that, how you have seen that change or the way you see it being practiced. You're lucky, at least, I mean, you're living in another part where the whole concept is different and you see that part. But because you've been part of the entire system and you have the mediation world otherwise also, so I mean, first you have to take us through that progress, the concept, that how it evolved and the issues that you look at and how you think those things can be changed in the mediation world.
And it takes me back sort of to where you and I both started. Two really essential elements of conflict prevention, management, and resolution of mediation. The first, and maybe the most important in some ways, is we have no intrinsic value as a neutral. Our only value is as a resource to the people who come in conflict and who need help getting through that conflict as intact as possible so that they can go forward with their lives with less obstruction, with less harm from that conflict to the extent possible. And the second is that in order to do that, we have to honor the highest value of their humanity, even if their conduct, even if their words, even if their behavior and attitudes don't necessarily reflect the highest values of our humanity. We need to model and demonstrate and seek respect and understanding between us and the people that we work with, and ideally in the communications and in the proceedings in which we try to find paths toward a more peaceful, beneficial outcome.
Because
and the third,
yeah, please. Sorry. After you, please. Go ahead. I cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I was going to say the third piece is that if we can treat the people we work with sincere respect and understanding, if we can honor those values of ho'oponopono, regret for the harm, seeking to make peace for that harm, seeking the things that we can be thankful for that have not been harmed and can still be restored and cultivated and developed, and loving those things in ourselves and each other that make it possible for us as human beings to do that. If anything differentiates us from other beings, it is that ability to be able to marshal those resources and connect our collective humanity through core values that we can share and honor.
Well, that is why what my discussion and whatever, I don't know whether you've heard me in other sessions, when I look at the US and the US model and the world picking up the US model of mediation. But on the other hand, when I look at the situation there, a person like Michael Lang is not very happy with this whole transactional direction that mediation has gone. And I look at it from the perspective that if 100 million cases are filed in courts in the US every year, and it's been there for some 40-45 years as a formal system, where did things not go right that you have the whole thing be controlled by lawyers and not by mediators? I mean, everything should have gone there by this time because there should have been good user experiences and it should have been the first port of call. but it doesn't seem to be that, and it seems to be just that it's a flow is through the court system, and everything seems to be revolving around that. So why do you see that has happened?
That's a great question, and it's a question that if we got Ken Cloke and Susan Podzeba and all the great minds of mediation together, we could spend weeks or years on. Because on the one hand, you can look at mediation from data and from quantitative results and say, indeed, mediation has shown us that collaborative processes are much more healthy, humane, successful ways to resolve conflicts than adversarial combat of any kind, whether it's legal, physical, monetary, political, or other. And we see that. But at the same time, we also see that despite that, the systemic inequality, the systemic inhumanity, the systemic racism, casteism, bias, and prejudice that have plagued not just the US, but many other areas of the world as well, continue and continue at levels that should be intolerable to people of good conscience. That's the conflict that we most need to focus on, most need to come together to understand and to collectively team up through all the interdisciplinary resources we can to resolve. We need to look to the systems design people, the Lisa Blomgren-Amslers, the Jan Martinezes, the Larry Suskins. We need to look at the thought leaders, Richard Susskind, Ken Cloke, and others. And we need to look at people who have relinquished the opportunity to be able to become rich, famous, and publicly honored, and to go back to their homes and their environments and their people, and to bring that learning, that collaborative peacemaking is the preferable solution to adversarial conflict. The Laila Olapalis, the Tara Olapalis, the Anupama Ahluwalias, the justices of India's Supreme Court who have welcomed mediation into connection with the court system. We can see people who are championing the systemic use of mediation to deal with our systemic inequities. That's where the focus and the true effort really needs to be.
Well, I don't know, because when you say that, when I look at the US situation on the court system, and because it developed through the court system, I still feel that there is some issue when I'm saying that is what has survived still. Again, I'm telling you, I just can't get over this 100 million cases being filed in courts every year. That I can't get over, because I'm telling you, in a country like ours, if you're going in that direction and we have to take that US model, we'll have 400 million cases in the courts, because you have a 300 million population. If 400 million cases go into our courts every year, we are gone, finished. So I want that, if things, because there are people who started talking about this in the US, about this whole court system and how the issues behind it. So if those voices come out fast in the US, countries like ours where things have not happened, not too much has happened, because I am totally of the view that we have to start looking at developing mediation outside the court system, which is not happening, which has not happened. It seems not in the US also. It is still focused, the control of the lawyers is there over the whole process, how it happens. They kind of decide what's good, where the direction is going to go. So how do we break that? And in the US, maybe, how do we break it? But how do we not let it happen in countries where the whole private mediation as such is nothing, there's not happening, and the court system with its free mediation and the larger interest of the courts to get the backlog out, that profession won't develop. And how has it developed in the US also? You'll have to tell me that, how has it actually been developed for the private mediators, as in the people who are doing it outside the court system.
That's exactly right. And we have, just as we have very, very disparate strata, politically, economically, we have in our legal system, in our governance system, we have in our dispute resolution system. We have community mediation, which is free or very low cost, frequently with people who have some training and experience as mediators, but they're not necessarily trained in the law. They're not influential on the law. They don't bring about changes in the law. They don't change the systems. They do help to resolve individual level conflicts within those specialties. But are we maybe by doing that, simply placating and continuing the systemic harm that generates those conflicts and those abuses rather than correcting them? That's the question. And I think it's a great question. I agree with you 100%. I think that's exactly where we need to go. What needs to happen to completely upend and reform the system?
Well, I'm telling you, Chuck, I don't know how that has happened. I mean, I look at the community mediation. Look, I am looking at statistics. What I find I do a Google search and I find those statistics. We'll have to go. I mean, I would say that authentic, but they seem to be decent organizations that put it out. They're saying that only 400 community mediation centers in the US and only 400,000 cases go through those mediation centers. If that is the situation, I feel that the 45 years, it doesn't seem to have worked for the advantage of mediation in the country. Where did they go wrong? I mean, this is, I can share with you where I picked it up from, but this is in front of me. 400 mediation centers, 400,000 disputes, that's it. And 100 million in the courts. I'm telling you, I really can't get over this. I don't know where the issues are. You'll have to tell me.
No, that's exactly the question, is you can quantitatively and with statistics and data show that there have been tremendous contributions to individual conflict resolutions at that community level. But what you cannot show, we have to look at what's missing. What you cannot show is where's the change in the system that creates and perpetuates those abuses that lead to those conflicts, to those evictions, to those cutting off of water and power, to those deprivations of healthcare, to those deprivations of educational opportunity, to those deprivations of housing opportunity and work opportunity and income opportunity. Where's the change in the systemic inequalities and abuses? I don't see it.
I know. I mean, because why I have to keep looking at the whole US situation is because the world still is picking up the US model. And I feel that they need to look a little deeply into the whole situation. And maybe at this stage, when a lot of countries, I mean, mediation is just a word which is spoken, nothing much is happening on. So people like you who've had that experience and can bring it out today, we might not have to go through that entire process and come back to doing things differently after 40 years. I don't want that to happen. This is, according to me, a good time when this word is being thrown out. I'm not saying people know the process of what it's all about. There's still arbitration, mediation, confusion is all there. So today, if we're taking it, we can take it in a direction where we'll forget the past. Let's just say that, okay, whatever has happened, however it developed, and at that time there might have been a need for it, and whatever it might be, and all the learnings. How do you look at it going forward? If you have to go to a country where there is no mediation, there's no concept of mediation, there is the traditional method of mediation, which I just told you that James from Kenya, what he brought us and how they are working with that traditional system, that is important. So that's one area I've identified as a major area to work on for most countries. Most countries, I would say all countries. So that, but other than that, how would you take it forward?
And it may be not only how, but where. Because if the place where the resources are dedicated and centered is to serve the interests of those who already have the most resources, the most money and power, and to enable them to preserve as much of that money and power as possible at the expense of those who are marginalized, who are undervalued, who are underserved. If mediation is not changing those inequities, then it's serving them. We've come back full circle to the duality of the choice. You can either be equity, diversity, and empowerment active, or you are anti. There are only two choices. And I have huge respect for the incredibly gifted and respected mediators of the AAA, JAMS, London Court, ICC, all of those people. But my question remains, how does that help what is the most missing in our society to bring more equity, more humanity to those who are most marginalized, vulnerable, and underserved? Until we prioritize that and we put those resources there and we enact legal requirements to do that and budgetary requirements to do that and systemic requirements to do that, there's no incentive for those who benefit from it to relinquish it.
The way I look at it is that, first of all, I always keep saying that mediators, those with the mediator mindset, are special people. They can bring out change, at least work towards it. They can. The problem that I'm looking at is that on one end, Ken says that the role of mediators in social problem solving, and definitely there's a role there. But if I cannot give them a livelihood, how do I expect them to make that larger change? And I'm seeing it all over the world. These people are not being able to put their whole life, everything into mediation, which they want to do. Because once you have that mindset, that's what you want to do. So there is this mismatch in the expectation on one end and the ground realities on one end. How do we bridge that?
It's a great question. And it's a question that we've been grappling with for not a few years, but hundreds of years, because our regression has been away from more equal, more humane, more just societies in which those with the least resources and opportunity were granted more opportunities and more resources. That hasn't been happening. In fact, the opposite has been happening in this country and in many others. And yet at the same time, there are people out there who have done the studies who can show you that if you build a more equitably diverse, inclusive, and empowered society, including those who have been most marginalized and underserved, it will serve the overall best interests of even the rich and powerful in the society in a more sustainable, more humane way. So our values, our priorities, and the legal and institutional rules and structures and policies to prioritize them need to change.
It's a very, it's a systemic issue. It has to be looked in very, very deeply. Like I said, I keep saying that because on the face of it, what you see is not what you get. we have to go very, very deep, and then whatever needs to be changed. And for you is change. I'm saying that for other places, this is where it starts. And if it starts well, we can take it in the right direction. And I see a large role of mediators in the world, and I see that as them as hope. But can we bring them out? Can they actually do what we want them to do? All those questions are there. And lots of questions, Chuck, but these questions are not going to stop, and our discussions are not going to stop. We might have to end this session in the next couple of minutes because Ekta's here and her session starts in the next 5 minutes. But your last words, no, let's not say last words. That doesn't sound good. It's just something to conclude on.
Maybe one of the things that brings us back together is look at what you're doing here. Look at the people you are connecting. Look at the positivism, the idealism, the humanity, and the value of the thoughts and ideas that you are not only sharing, but endorsing, promoting, supporting among us. Each of us comes out of these communications with more hope, more positivism, more dedication to doing what is right because it's right than we had when we started. Maybe that's all we can really do at this point. And to be alert to those situations where there may be a possibility to connect it to something more systemic, to a larger unit level, whether it be family, community, city, town, region, state, nation, but to look for those systemic paths and opportunities and connections and build them.
Absolutely. I think that's the main thing, that just keep connecting those good people, have those good conversations, just take it forward and it'll grow. We'll get there. We'll get there. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to happen in a year or 2 years. It'll take its time. It will. But as long as we've started and this, look, I see it in front of me. If you have almost 100 people coming together and with such nice thoughts, every one of them, you've heard of so many of them. They're all such nice people. I mean, they just, like I said, they're wonderful people. So if 100 can get together, those 100 will go out and connect another 100, 10,000 goes to 1,000,000. It just moves on. So I think we've just started a journey which will take us somewhere. That's how I look at it. But as long as I keep hearing your good words, it always feels good. Just feels good. So if what I'll do is I'll end this session here, and you can then have a conversation with Giovanni and all who are there. So thank you very much, Chuck. Very nice talking to you.
Vikram, a pleasure. Giovanni, buongiorno.
Yeah, we'll get him in. We'll get him. He comes in at the post-session discussion.